Hello, Camille. Welcome to the Home to Self podcast. I am
Thanks for
so
having me.
excited. Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. You've been someone that I've followed not for that long. I honestly don't even really know how I came onto your profile on Instagram, but you know how it is synchronistically. We find the people that are meant to be in our field for whatever reason. And I just feel like you have a very unique and just like straight to the point perspective on healing that I really appreciate. And just the way that you explain things just really makes sense in my mind. And so I'm really excited to have you on the show to share a little bit more about the work that you do and your perspective on healing, on doing the inner work, the self development work with the listeners. So, first and foremost, thank you and welcome to the Home to Self podcast.
Yeah, thanks. I'm honored to be here.
So, your bio, the line that you have is inspiring liberation through radical self responsibility, right? And so I think that the theme that I really want this episode to go into is breaking free from the victim mentality and really starting to take responsibility for our lives, because this is also something I talk about a lot. And when I look at like my journey and what I have, like really what is at the foundation of all of it, and the progress I've made, and the transformation I've experienced, it's like going from really deep generational victim mentality that I really still see so deep in my family to starting to break out of that, you know, and it's a continual journey of
It really is.
evolution in that. But I'd love to start first hearing about your philosophy, if you will, or just your perspective on healing, because I've heard you talk about in a reel, I believe, about how, you know, when we approach doing the work from a place of low self-worth and of trying to fix and solve and like, you know, come at it from this place of like, well, I am broken and I need to fix myself through this work, then it doesn't really have the same effect. And so if you want to just share a little bit about how you view the inner work in this and your
Yeah.
philosophy.
Yeah. I mean, let me take it back a little bit because I think my own journey towards finding this work and learning about the drama triangle, right? The victim, the villain, the savior, and ultimately making my way to what at the moment is the root of healing, right? To me, the radical self responsibility is the place I've landed that I have yet to now for quite a while get any deeper. And so just taking it back, I mean, healing to me, I think starts with like, I want to love myself. I want to love myself. Yeah. I want to be loved. I want to truly love myself, which starts very superficially for most people. You know, I want to get a six pack, or I want to lose weight, or I want the even achieving things like I want, you know, my dream job. I want to meet my partner. And so the very things that we have to control thinking like this is going to make me lovable, like, or if I lose weight, you know, I'll find my partner, or and so the arc, I'll like speed through like a decade of what the self-development work kind of brought me through was basically first just fitness, yeah, and tracking macros and counting calories, and then you quickly are like, okay, well, even achieving my, you know, in air quotes, dream body, looking back, then I had no self-worth. So it's like there's more to it than this. And you kind of start peeling off layers and increasingly realizing like, okay, like there's something deeper. And then you find the kind of psychosomatic thing. Oh, there's an inner reality. There's, you meet projections, you understand that what you see in the world. And this is really a lot of my work anchors in this concept of kind of mirror work, of seeing yourself through the world. And instead of trying to change and fight the world and your own body, right? Like your symptoms, your weight, your, you know, insert the thing that you don't like about yourself or about the other person, right? You kind of eventually meet that crossroads of like, okay, it's not just me that I'm fighting the world. I've made my way to the place where like where radical self-responsibility is the one, I guess, concept, do you want to call it a concept, that has liberated me in absolutely every conflict, challenge, moment. It's like it's a constant. And so in a lot of other things that I've found or work, there's exceptions. You see it even in scientific studies, one person it doesn't apply to, like it's, and which it doesn't really matter, right? If you're in a study of um, a million people and one person it doesn't apply to, it's like it does matter if you're that one person. And so, you kind of the unraveling and the unraveling has led me to this concept, which we can get into the radical self-responsibility work, the shedding victimhood, and shedding more than actually victimhood, shedding saviorhood too, not wanting to be playing in the role of the victim, the villain, or the savior. And so stepping out of this drama triangle, and in what I've experienced to date, being this universal concept that applies to every situation, no matter how confronting. Liberation is accessible when we start to kind of understand these concepts. And so we stop needing to go to war with our own body, with our problems, or with other people. And we can reclaim this freedom, truly, that when we understand and kind of work with it, and it's really a working with ourselves as opposed to fighting ourselves, which for me, that's what self-development was for so long, was I don't like this aspect of myself, be it a pattern, a part of my body, a way that I look. And instead of understanding and working with it, becoming a fuller version of myself, I was fighting it and becoming a smaller version. And back to what you were asking, that idea that if you do things from a place of low self-worth, it doesn't work, which is what a lot of self-development is. It's like, oh, I need to be the best version of myself so that I can be lovable. Versus, exiting the drama triangle and learning to love that which of course paradoxically dissolves it all, which is maybe a bit complex for some people, but we can get into it more if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And it really is such a subtle but profound shift that I've also experienced. I think that, you explained it so well in terms of like, we come into this work oftentimes with a more like, I don't know, superficial goal, for lack of better word, right? Like the body, or we think it's going to get us the love we want or whatnot. And then we start to unravel these layers and it just like goes deeper and deeper. And I really do believe this like integration piece is really at the heart of it, of like the paradox of like inviting in these parts and getting curious about them is actually what like dissolves their power over us. And it's it's just a different way of looking at the healing work, right? Of recognizing that there's nothing actually wrong with you. It's just a matter of leaning in and getting curious and trying to understand these parts so that we can take back our power. And I'd love for you to dive a little bit deeper into your story if you want to, on how did you arrive at this work? Was it, you said it started through health and then you just kept exploring and kept reading and kept learning, or how did it manifest for you?
It's always interesting answering this question, like how far to take it back, and also let's just see what comes up, because it's the story is essentially of that of well, first of all, I studied political science and international development studies at a good university in Canada, thinking like, I would do law, I'd save the world. I went into politics, I wanted to go into law, and, seeing like the people imprisoned unfairly, which still like makes me cry sometimes. We watched a movie the other night, I was like, oh, that's heavy stuff. So I wanted to save, and I was definitely playing that role of savior, of like, what can I do to fight the injustices of the world? And even identifying problems where like, oh, veganism is a problem that I need to help people out of, like this very saviory energy, and thinking that like that would make me ultimately, like all that we pursue, right, feel good in my own experience. And the disillusion of that faded, I think, around my second year of university, realizing like I did a summer with the UN, and I was like, this is not it. Like I can see the force it felt like the West comes in. I was in Nicaragua, it's coming in, and like, it was just like, I was like, no, this is what the West is. Like, why? And looking at these cultures that are, where we were in the remote mountains of Madagascar, I was like, there's so much more beauty here than I'm seeing, that we're like, here's your freedom, like with Coca-Cola and GMO grains, like feeding them with GMO grains and implementing vaccination programs. I'm like, this is something about this is not right. And so that illusion of like, okay, well, the world, I don't know that the world needs saving. And so in those 4 years of university realizing like, okay, I think I'm trying to save myself here. Like there was a piece of like me needing to resolve that which I could see, and I didn't have the language at the time at all. This is really more of a hindsight thing, but I learned about fitness. I learned about nutrition. I broke my knee in my last year of university, and I was on the couch for 5 weeks. And so I started picking up nutrition books and learning about stuff, and kind of pivoted my journey really into a passion about health. And I could see, I was like, oh yeah, like this feels better to me, like helping individuals get healthy, because the idea of saving the world, it's like, where, like, is that even something that needs to be done? I don't know, but it definitely starts with the individual. So that kind of redirected me into health and fitness. I started studying to get my personal training certification, and yeah, that too. So I had relatively honest, and it's difficult when you talk about a concept so broadly, right? When I say I had low self-worth, in many ways I did not. Like it wasn't like I was this like, it's both. But I could see that despite how I was showing up in the world, how I looked, my environment, my friends, my work, I didn't fundamentally have like a deep sense of self-worth or confidence. And so that too, like the illusion that all you had to do was help someone get in good shape, or all you had to do was, eat a really good diet. It was like still the dots weren't connecting fully. And yeah, little by little, I think just through my own reaching the thing that I thought would make me happy, not being happy. And again, happy. I was at a baseline of happy, and I was always at a baseline of healthy and connected and the rest of it. But this like soul whisper of like, this isn't it. Like, this is not the finishing point. And so just layer after layer, and a really huge catalyst, I think, for women in general is always partnership, is yearning for the relationship that they think, I mean, we grew up with Disney, we grew up with all these stories around Prince Charming, saving us from our, whisking us away from our castle. And so having anchoring in that, and definitely seeing so many aspects of my life figured out, but the relationship piece being quite chaotic, quite dramatic, really being victim to the person I was interested in, who just wouldn't seem, and I was like fighting for to be seen. And that happened for a very long time. And I think the biggest catalyst was, a relationship in which really I could really see my patterns at that point. I'd found the work, not exactly as I do it now, but I could see the discrepancy enormously between what I wanted and how I was showing up. And so I think ultimately my biggest teacher was my own bullshit. Like I was so sick of my own shit, and I was like, this is actually no one else's fault. Like I was very good for a long time at playing victim to the guy or the this or the that, but I was like, no, really, I could like see, like the veil was very thin, that it was me. And so my own BS was like, okay, like this, I got to figure it out fully. And long story longer, I moved to Mexico, and it was really a devotion. It ended up being 9 months until actually I met my now partner. But 9 months of like real deep excavation, meeting my parts, noticing, and really kind of creating the fabric of how I now work with women. Which, it's funny, people will say, oh, it's this, you must have studied this, or you've done family constellations, or you've done, I don't even know, there's all these like trademark things that people come to me like, oh, is this what you studied? And I was like, no, I had to figure it out, because I was suffering and I wasn't calling in what I wanted. And so as much as degrees and certifications, I think, have a place and a role, nothing beats you meeting your own shit and being like, okay, I've had enough, and how I've been doing it isn't working. And so what do I need to do differently? And so it's kind of given birth to this process that I now, share with women. And it's, I wish it was a cookie cutter, right? I wish I could be like, here's the manual, just do this. But it's very much not that. But it also is a process that I think people can learn, and especially if they're open to not playing the blame game anymore, which a lot of people actually do want to play. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love to learn, how your journey brought you here, because it is really through our own struggles and our own curiosities that we end up, really finding the answers for ourselves that then we are inspired to teach others. And I'd love for you to break down responsibility in the way that you see it, because I think that a lot of people can relate responsibility to like blame or fault, and it can feel like this like intense thing that just adds another layer of shame. But I think remembering, like, connecting the dots between responsibility and liberation, or responsibility and freedom, is where it becomes a lot more inviting and exciting, at least to me, as to like why I want to lean into that.
Yeah, I think people, even looking at it through a slightly different lens, people often, so there's a bad guy, okay? Someone did something to you, whether it was in your childhood or maybe it's your partner. Something activates you in the moment. It could be the person that cut you off in traffic. And the idea of taking responsibility for your side of it, the beginning stage is like, well, they did something that made me upset. And so there's a lot of rejection of this work, I think, around the idea that if you take responsibility for your life, your part in it, your perspective, whatever you want to call it, that they're going to be let off the hook. And so there's that like, well, no, they need to take responsibility. And that's not what this is about. The work for me of radical self-responsibility is about your own liberation. People talk about it also about forgiveness. It's kind of weaved into this. Sometimes it's more easy to understand that you don't forgive the other person for their sake. You actually do it for yourself. This work is selfish. It's about your own process, your own liberation, your own inner peace. We actually can't give anyone else inner peace. We can't free anyone else, because once you start to understand the nature of projection, which is, I see in the world that which I am, you can start to see that when people do, in air quotes, bad things, we can get into why those are air quotes if you want, but when someone does something that you perceive to be wrong or bad, only hurt people. Like, pain is an echo, and so it's not your role to keep them accountable. It's not your role to control what they do or say. In fact, we can't. And if we kind of peel back why we try to do that, at the core, it's to feel okay in our own experience. I can't self-regulate. I'm not actually free. Like, when we get to that idea that this work is about our own freedom, your own freedom comes when people can do or say what they like, and you have the capacity to hold space for who they are, not who you want them to be. And yeah, essentially that idea that, like, if you can't hold your own and you're not free, then you're going to go through life trying to control everyone and, manipulate, which, there's words like people pleasing, and we think like, oh, I'm pleasing them, but like, you're always trying to stay safe. People pleasing is actually an attempt to not bother people, so that if they get angry with you or frustrated, like, you can't hold their anger or frustration. So it's like, oh, I don't want to upset this person, because then I have to deal with their upset. Versus, like, the work for me, radical self-responsibility, is, it is multifaceted, but at its core, it's like, I can be who I am in the world, which requires mindfulness. It's not like I can do whatever, because you'll see the mirror of doing whatever, like, it creates chaos in your life. But it's at its core, I can be who I am, and I'm not worried about upsetting someone if I'm authentic and aligned and me. Versus, if I show up in the world as who I am and it upsets someone, if my capacity is small, I can't hold, the upset or the way in which other people might react to me. So I'm just going to chameleon through life, play small, say yes, or, and try and not bother anyone. It's a very different way of navigating the world.
Yeah, and I really believe that it comes down to recognizing that, like, no one outside of you is actually like dictating your experience internally, and that's where that's where the responsibility comes in, right? And that's also where, like our power lives. And that's why it's like equating responsibility to power is often really helpful for me, because I recognize that as much as I'd love to blame someone else for the reason that I feel this way or the reason I can or can't do something, it's really, if that really is the case, then we are completely powerless. We have no say over how we feel, and that is a completely disempowering place to live. Whereas if you really choose to say, you know what, like, yeah, that person might have activated something, but that experience was already within me, that trigger was already living within me. And so if I choose to look at this within myself, I can liberate myself, so I'm not being like tossed around throughout this life based on other people and my circumstances.
I think an example will help. And I can share a personal one, but I think it's one that's relatable, where if someone points out something about your physical self that you don't like, and I can give an example. Years ago, I hadn't seen my grandparents in ages, in France, and my grandma pointed out, she's like, "Did you put on weight?" She came in, you know, a bit of context, she's very overweight, you know, so like when we start to understand projections and her desire probably to help me, or like think that, oh, I don't want you to go down the route, like the intention is out the window. We don't know why people do what they do, and often it's not malicious. We think it might be because it hurts, but people's intentions is, you know, is neither here nor there really when it comes to this work. What I know is that bothered me. That comment really bothered me, and it was this like, how could you, you know, like what, like, well, look at like all the stories, and it's helpful for this work. Let the petty voice speak. So often we will rationalize our way out of a petty voice and be like, oh, you know, it's just because of this, or it's just because of that. But if there's activation, there's work to be done. Because if you just diffuse it, does that make sense? Like if you just diffuse the voice and you're like, oh no, it doesn't matter, or I'm leaving here soon anyways, or I'm gonna put a boundary up. You know, people love that. I'm gonna put a boundary up and she can't speak to me that way. Like, and that's gonna solve it. It's like, no, that doesn't solve anything actually, because what I meet when someone says something about anything, my work, my body, my relationship, my, you know, if someone says something about your child and it bothers you, anything that bothers you is about you. And it's that part of you agrees. And it's not all of you, right? Understanding the idea of having many parts, and that you're meeting a part of you, perhaps a part that you haven't sat with ever. But instead of meeting the part of you that agrees, most people go to war with the person that showed them that which they are. And so this work truly is one of connection and unity and fullness, because imagine how differently that could go if she comes in and, you know, or it's a very common one at the holidays, you know, an aunt will be like, oh, you know, have you always, says the insert the thing that bothers you. Imagine being like, yeah, you know what? I think I did put on weight and it makes me pretty uncomfortable. Like, you have a bridge of connection, right? Like, and all of a sudden the person who's the enemy becomes your friend, it's the mirror. Like, they're showing you, because if someone says something, and this is another example, if someone says like, wow, you're tall, I love that I'm tall. I love that about myself. And I'm like, I'll stand up taller and be like, yeah, like I'm tall. But if it's not a compliment or an insult, it's really how you interpret your relationship to yourself. And so people pointing things out, that's where the idea of like everyone is your teacher. Bring it on. Bring it on. Dysregulate me so that I can see where I'm not free. And there is my work. And that's the radical self-responsibility piece, is like, if I want to be free, thank you. Show me where I'm not free. Upset me so that I can meet that part of myself, take responsibility for that which I believe about myself, so that I can navigate the world without needing people to perform for me and not upset me. And they can just be themselves and I can be myself. And to me, that's freedom.
Yeah, I mean, we can either try and get to a place of freedom, which it really isn't, but it like this expectation of once my circumstances are perfect and other people treat me the right way or see me through a certain lens, then I'll feel free and confident and self-love, right? And it's just you never really get there. And we can talk about this in a moment. But yeah, or you can recognize that like freedom is an inside job, and like really it's all these parts coming up are asking to be, through my eyes, they're asking to be like loved and held and accepted by you first, because ironically when we are okay with something, it doesn't trigger us as much when other people point it out, like you mentioned, right? And so I'd love to dive in a little bit more into like how, and like you said, there's no like step-by-step process for this. Obviously it's like so nuanced and dependent on context and everything, but how do you, like for giving people some sort of guideline of how, if a trigger comes up, like are there specific questions that you like to ask yourself or that are powerful to start to help us get to the root as opposed to just continuing to make our focus external?
Yeah, so many ways to answer this question, honestly. I think one, and it kind of depends, maybe I'll call it like how far along the path you are, because for some people, if they're listening to this, I'm guessing not if they're tuning in, and they are regularly hearing about these concepts. But if it's brand new, the idea of the mirror work is starting to dissolve the charge by seeing that the other person, what you're judging them for, it's a Byron Katie concept, the turnaround of like finding the most charged thing you think they are or that you think they shouldn't do, and kind of turning it around to explore either how you are that thing and you don't think that part of you is good. When we go back to childhood, how we show up, if it's punished or if we're rewarded out of it. So when we're doing something our parents don't want us to do, that we learn, okay, this makes me unlovable. And so fast forward into adulthood, if we see other people do that, either it's something we do and we don't think is acceptable within our own self, or we don't do it and we're like, how can this person flaunt their body or act so confident? And so it's either this thing that I want that I am not, or it's this thing that I am and I reject about myself. So that as like a kind of beginning, just awareness is very helpful, because already it brings humor, honestly, in my opinion. I'm like, oh, literally this thing that I'm like, a great one is traffic. It's the easiest one. Like, tell me you haven't played every role of the drama triangle in your car. When someone cuts me off, I'm like, how could they? But if I want to cut someone off, I'm like, they need to let me in. It's laughable. It's like I've played every role, and the car is very activating. There's this idea that like you're always right. Even before I got my license, I rode my bike a lot. It was the same. It was like the cars need to give way to the bicycle. As soon as I'm in a car, I'm like, these bicyclists, like, so it's that concept, right? It's kind of anchoring in that. And to date, there has never been a single scenario. And that's why I love, coming back to it being this universal, like it applies universally. I've never found a scenario in which it's not true. Sometimes it's very uncomfortable. Byron Katie's podcast is helpful for this because you see her work with people. I mean, I don't record my calls with women, but it's the same. It's like, you think not in this scenario. They're like, this is the worst. It's like, no, but it's never the worst. The worse the scenario, the more free you are on the other side of taking responsibility for your role in it. And then, yeah, another like kind of moving part of this work for me is understanding that your subconscious is like a round table with 100 versions of you at it. And so maybe let's call it the head of the table, but realistically, you're just at the table like everyone else. The work is about integrating these parts. So when you get triggered, or when you get activated, or when you get sad, or when you get heightened emotion in any way, what you're doing in that moment is you have the opportunity to meet one of your parts. and one of your parts has a belief. It's usually quite petty and childish because you can kind of understand it as these different parts being different stages in your own development that are kind of arrested. Like something happened that couldn't be processed, and so like boom, you have a part of you that believes, for example, that if you are in better shape, you will be able to finally find the person that you're meant to be with. And unless you take responsibility for bringing that part of you back online, becoming in case of a woman, the mother to this part, and helping resource this part so that she can come back online, back into the party, not be so sure that in their misperceptions, like these parts of us have all these beliefs that we're so sure are true, and unless we take that role of the great mother to these parts, every time the survival mode is engaged, they're sure that that belief needs to be enacted on, and so they will drive the bus. They will perpetuate the habits that we think are bad habits, right? The eating disorders and the over exercisings and the insert whatever it is. But that part's trying to survive, and it believes something so surely that it will hijack anything you think is going to help you thrive, right? Your embodied mindful intuitive eating goes out the window if your body thinks it's in survival, like it's threatened literally by death. And so that's the other piece to this, is really understanding that there's many parts to you, and kind of digesting the world through these parts is how we become fuller version of ourselves, where these parts are like, oh, I'm safe now. I don't need to actually march up to the front of the bus and start driving it, because there's someone, which is adult you, who's taking responsibility for my process, and now I can go back and play like children should.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think that for so many people, it's this external chase, right? Where these parts that are so convinced, like, oh, it's when I get the body, then I'll finally feel better. And I feel like so many people, and to some degree still, like they're subconscious blind spots, so it can be tricky, but it's wild to me to think how many of us are controlled by these parts, right?
And still
allowing
me.
them.
Still me.
Yes,
I'm
for
not
sure.
like, this isn't like I've found it and I've figured it out. It's a practice, and it's an unraveling, and still there's periods in my life. For me, it's mostly with my partner, like it's the place in which it shows up when we have conflict, where I slip into, I don't know, age 3, and you can see it. And even in the moment, it's really a practice of awareness and noticing, like, oh, I'm doing the thing. Like I'm playing the victim, and it's that thing, victim, villain, savior, is really understanding that when we slip into the role, which some people, the savior is a particularly sneaky one, because we see it all the time. Oh, I just want to help this person. Like, this person needs my help, or my parents, oh, they need my help, or what. And no, it's like, as soon as we play any of the roles, we're disempowered. They need my help. Beautiful opportunity to explore, what is it about this person, for example, getting sick or being unhealthy or making a bad choice. My capacity is too small to hold their reality. And so I will try and manipulate them. Like, that's what helping is. Like, we're manipulating. If it's solicited and someone comes to you and says, hey, your parent comes to you and says, hey, I noticed that you're so interested in nutrition. Please tell me about seed oils. Like, no one's doing that. Most people aren't doing that. We come in thinking like, oh, this person needs to get healthier because it's what's right for them. We don't know what's right for anyone. All I know is when I increase my capacity and do my own work, I can love people for who they truly are. I can hold space for who my partner truly is, not the version of him that I'm trying to morph so that I don't have to feel anything that I can't hold.
So how do we start to increase our capacity?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways that I look at this. One is very more like somatic, and it's understanding that, like, we have a feeling ceiling. And as soon as we start to feel, and this is good or bad sensations or good sensations. People, I think, often understand that like they'll dissociate if things are too scary or overwhelming, right? We go to the TV or we scroll. It happens with pleasure too. This, you know, the idea like, oh, if I could just go to the beach for a whole week and relax, then I'd be able to like regulate and be better. But it's like, no, go to the beach, and how many minutes until you're thinking about your to-do list, or you're scrolling on the beach, or you're judging someone, right, on who's walking next. It's like we're like addicted. Like the nervous system actually can't be with pleasure or pain. And so understanding that kind of ceiling and becoming familiar when you're at your edge, right? Starting to notice like, oh yeah, I'm whatever your habit is, like whatever the ways in which you dissociate when things are too much, which a big signal is going into other people's experiences, like thinking, what is this person thinking? What is this person like? Oh, well, what are they going to do or say? Practicing conversations too much. Yeah. Like all these kinds of, well, what if this scenario and what if this scenario? Like that's just survival mode. So when we start to notice either that we're reaching for the coping mechanism, or we're playing all these possibilities, scenarios, or revisiting arguments in our head, we're kind of ruminating, be there. Actually feel what is happening in your body. Have a feeling practice. You know, people often think their feelings and feel their thoughts. So when you're noticing that you're at your capacity, like, oh, you know, I'm in that place of, you know, wondering what they're thinking, for example, like you've left your own body. That starts with a sensation. So becoming really familiar with the sensations and realizing that it's kind of like the alarm bell's gone off in your body. There's a somatic sensation. For me, it's a tightness in the chest and the throat, kind of heaviness in that area. Be with it. Actually feel it. Because it's like anything. If we're not familiar with a thing, it feels dangerous. The mind will start to scan for the problem. It's like, what do I need to fix? Who can I control? What needs to change? Because this, I don't know what's going on in here. And sure, we can go back to childhood. Most of us didn't ride out our emotions. Punishment and reward, we never learned to feel. And so actually feeling is a good starting place for increasing that capacity. Yeah. Just like being with, or the pleasure. It can be pleasure too. You can have a pleasure practice of any kind, even laying on the beach. And well, if you live at the beach, I happen to live at the beach, but lay in the grass and feel the wind on your skin and just notice, like, what is your capacity to experience pleasure?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's, you know, we try to, I think it's natural for the brain to try and complicate all of these things, but it's really just like like pushing our edge is like our capacity to just be with these sensations on both sides of the spectrum and
Literally.
increasing that. Yeah, it's so interesting because we don't push that edge because we have so many ways to numb out and distract and manipulate. But really, I love the concept of just like stop and just be with it, and like how deeply can you meet yourself there, and then it really, and this comes back to the mirror concept, like the deeper that you can meet yourself and your parts and your sensations, the more you can hold space for someone else without needing them to change for you to feel okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so it just makes sense. And yeah, I feel like let's see from here, so a question that I had, and I wonder, I'm curious to hear your answer on this, is like, do you think it is necessary to go back to childhood in order to heal some of these patterns, or can you just deal with what comes up in the moment?
How I like to work with women is to just deal with what is the most charged in the moment. But I find almost inevitably it's kind of impossible not to like kind of weave in and out of noticing where this was first a thing and why it's so charged, because often in the moment, this is where we rationalize our way out of like, oh, this doesn't matter, like let me just move on, let me just bulldoze over. I can see why even when we start to taste this work, like, oh, I understand that this is about him, not me, so I don't have to worry about this. But the wound that's being poked at when we get triggered, even though our adult conscious mind can see that it's not a big deal, like traffic, right? Or you get a look from, or this is a good one. Your partner's having a hard day. Like they're stressed, they're having a bad day. And you start to get dysregulated. You're like, well, did I do anything, or what, oh, I want his affection. And so the adult part of me that's online can very easily be like, oh, it doesn't matter. He's allowed to have a bad day. It's all good. But understanding that when a wound is brushed up against, it's not your adult self. Oftentimes that wound comes from. It's a very, very old wound. And the thing that happened, for example, which also we're great at rationalizing our way out of, it's like, that doesn't matter. I don't have any, capital T trauma. My childhood was great. And yeah, in many ways, my childhood was great. I didn't have any kind of abuse, all these formal things that we perceive at some point to be like, oh yeah, that would mess you up. But if we put ourselves in our child body, in our little tiny baby newborn body, what we perceive to be overwhelming or scary is very different to what we perceive to be overwhelming or scary as an adult. And so it's helpful in my experience to understand and put ourselves there sometimes that even for me, like having my own bedroom as a baby and as a child, deep into like my honestly early teens, I had so many sleep issues. Like I was was terrified of the dark, didn't want to sleep in my own room. Like I was always trying to sleep in my parents' bed. Terrified, honestly. Like I could have a whole podcast on that alone. Like it was terror for me as a child, which as an adult and for long periods, it was like, no, who cares? Like I was scared of the dark, like all these things that are normalized. But the reality is understanding and connecting with these parts to me is the second piece of expanding the capacity, is actually meeting the child inside, which kind of, and I mean, inevitably takes you to your childhood, because what we're doing, at least how I navigate this work, is we're weaving like the tapestry of these parts back in and trying to resource them so that they can come back online and we can become a more congruent version of ourselves that isn't continuously being pulled by the 6-year-old or the 3-year-old or the newborn that has a belief about the world that isn't correct. Like the world has become an unsafe place at many stages in childhood. And so our work is, which to me, back to your question, it presents itself here and now. I don't have to ever start with, okay, what happened in your childhood? Because it's happening right now. It's going to show itself, whether it be in your relationships, in your relationship to your body, your habits, your diet, your job. It doesn't matter. Whatever bothers you about your life and you think is a problem, it's coming from these misperceptions, these parts that are arrested development. And so it's kind of both. I don't start with the childhood, but the child part of you is the one kind of pulling you out of the dream life into survival mode. So I can't, at this stage, I see the value in both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really all so connected, right? When we think about even just like the past doesn't exist, the future, like it's all happening here and now. And I love the way that you explain kind of the subconscious being like all these different versions of ourselves at different ages and different stages of development. It just, to me, that brings in so much more compassion, right? Because I think that the judgment and the shame and the guilt of like, oh, we should know better. And why did I act that way? It's like recognizing that it's not your highest self or your adult version of self right now. It was probably a younger part that reacted in that moment. And so ironically, again, it's like bringing that part in and you finding acceptance for it and you nurturing it and reparenting it. I feel like that is what really softens it, because going back all the way to the beginning when we talked about, approaching this work from a place of low self-worth where we think we need to fix ourselves and get rid of these parts. I've seen a lot of my clients like that get, sometimes at the beginning they get frustrated because they're like, oh, I've worked through this. Like, why is this coming up again? And then it's like, oh, that's the perspective, is like, this should be gone. Like I should fix this and get rid of this. But really recognizing and like being humbled by the fact that like these parts may, I don't know, to me, I'm like, they may always be around, but they're no longer in control of our lives. Do you
Mm-hmm.
see it that way too?
Yeah, I mean, what comes up for me, this is like, it's the art of becoming an actual parent, right? Like a lot of like parenting is, it should be, I'm not even going to call it hard, but it's repetitive. This is, I think, part of why we get so wounded is parents, they like the child's growing up, it's discovering the world. It has a million questions. It wants to be loved unconditionally. And parents are like, I don't have time for this. And we do that to our inner self. We're like, this again? You have it. Like, what? I told you this already. And you see it in with actual between parents and children. It's like, I told you not to throw your spoon. You're throwing your spoon again. And there's this force, like this, you need to fit into my world. It's like, no, you have a child. Why are you having a child? Like, we have a child to help them be the fullest, most authentic, aligned version of themselves, not so that they can meet some need we have to be loved by something. It's quite twisted, and the pattern repeats itself within us. We have a part of us that's like, hey, like, I'm overwhelmed. And we're like, again? You're overwhelmed again? And it's like, if that's the energy at which we approach our work, we will never heal. It's just not possible, because the nature of it is fuller. It's integrating. It's becoming more of yourself. It's not going to war with yourself. So as much as people often learn, it's like, if it's done from that place of force and desire to be like in control of who you are versus like truly just meeting yourself and seeing where that takes you, that's where you get which was me. I mean, I've done this too, the obsessive with the perfect diet and the obsessive with saying the exact right thing. The whole act of health becomes a performance. And there's no way you're not going to hit like at a million miles an hour a wall at some point. Some diagnosis, some random thing, some surprise divorce where it's like, what? I was such a good girl. I did all the things. And how is this? It's like, well, no, it's not about being a good girl. It's actually about becoming the fullest version of yourself and trusting that life from that place is exactly what it's meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, side note, I just want to say my call got canceled, which is exactly
cool.
what I was hoping would happen.
Cool.
It's not like a client call or anything, so we're all good. But
yeah, cool.
Are you okay on time to go a little bit?
I'm good till 9:15. If that's fine for you. It's like
okay.
15 minutes past the hour.
Perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, it shouldn't go much longer than that. So, okay. I'd love to dive into a more specific wound or trigger for a lot of women, especially a lot of women that I work with, and also this was, and maybe to some degree still is, my story. Yeah, we all do, right? It's like it's the I'm not enough to some degree, and us trying to prove our worth. Usually that comes through perfectionism, overachieving, maybe even the people pleasing, and these kinds of coping mechanisms. I'd love to just unpack that a little bit from your perspective.
Yeah. So going back just to quick understand, like, you got multiple parts, yeah? And part of you believes she's not enough. And it could be multiple parts, but let's just work with one at a time, right? There's a part of you that believes she's not enough. How much time do you spend with her?
Not enough.
Right?
Right?
And so, yeah, I mean, exactly. That's kind of it, is like we're trying to find our worth and working our way out of not enoughness. But the part of us that believes that is essentially disregarded in the process. And so the work to me is turn towards the part of you that's not enough and really get clear, like, have you made her feel like enough? And that's not crazy complex. It is consistent work. Think about it this way. If you're in a relationship, even when I'm the most activated, if I'm super upset and dysregulated and what I need is so minor to shift out of that And don't get me wrong, part of it's me. Like, if I don't have the baseline desire, but anyways, we can go down that rabbit hole after. But in the moment, right, if when we see the duality of my partner and me, what regulates me in that moment, snaps me out of it, is him being fully present, loving, and giving me a hug and saying that none of this matters. How often do you do that with yourself? The part of you that feels like not enough, even the question, right? And I do this all the time. It's like, it's funny. I interviewed someone recently. It was the very question. I was like, well, how do we do it? And the how do we do it is very often, how do I get rid of this thing? I'm just so sick of not feeling like I'm not enough. And it gives life to the very drama triangle. It's like, this is the thing I don't want, versus like, am I spending enough time with this part of myself? And the time it doesn't have to be quantity, but it's really quality. Which goes back to like what I need when I'm dysregulated. I don't need my partner to give me a 10-hour sermon on his love for me. I just need to feel it deeply for a moment. And I'm like, it's like the world washes away. I'm like, okay. Very childlike. Yeah, when a child, has a big cry, has a big cry, and then is like, on with it, back to play. It's a moment. So it's the absolute presence with the part of you and turning towards instead of going to war with it.
Yeah. And for women, I think it's so natural for us to understand how we would approach a child who is in that situation. Like if a child, like your own daughter, came up to you and was like feeling not enough and really sad and just down on herself, like it's like our natural mothering instinct to like hold her, not try to fix her or make her wrong, but just hold her. And so it's really like learning how to do that for ourselves. I love that. And I'm curious, so like from your perspective, there's no like working with the subconscious belief of trying to like rewire that? Is it just really that like taking, like showing up for those parts of ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's this is where the work kind of deviates a little bit depending on the personality. Like doing too much thinking, I'm realizing more and more, is a major defense. When we try and intellectualize things too much and like fully map it out and figure it out, you can see it and I'm one of these personalities. Like it's like, no, I'm gonna master this and I'm gonna do it perfectly, and then it's gonna be gone forever. And yes, partially the being in a container with someone else and being seen and heard and unpacking and those, it has a place. Absolutely, it has a place in my work, because it's not about just, it's this simple thing. Does like the simplicity of that answer that I gave you before about spending time with yourself, also being witnessed by someone else, and in your mess, in your process, and having your story heard, it actually played a huge role for me in my own journey. I made a list. I called it a shame list, because I realized in that past relationship, it's like, I'm trying so hard to be loved by this person, and I'm showing up as my best. Like there was no trigger in that relationship. There was no anything, because I was so focused. I was like at the starting line of the race. I was like, choose me fully, please. Like that's where it starts. Right. And then, so I was trying so hard and showing up as my best, like flexible, easygoing, I can do, nothing matters. Oh, whatever. Like it in hindsight, like wild, truly wild. No needs, right? No needs ever. But I realized like, I actually don't want to be loved for this, which I wasn't even being chosen for that. I don't want to be loved for my perfect self. I want to be fully chosen. So I identified, and it was a long ass list of things that I hide from the world. Stories that, in fact, unless spoken, would never need to come up. Stuff from my childhood that no one knows about. Just dynamics and things that are long gone. Beliefs I had about myself that I actually don't have anymore, but that are a part of the fabric of who I am. And so increasingly it was like, actually, it's not just being the perfect version of myself. Like, how can I let these other parts and stories of my life be seen? And yeah, I remember with my partner, one of the first things he asked me when we met was like, what are all the what are things You like the worst, the best about yourself and the least about yourself. And I was like so confronted. I was like, wait, what? Least? Like the physical things? Like it was like just a big open-ended question. And it was liberating. It was like, oh, here, this is who I am. And of course, the things that I'm most self-conscious about, he's like, oh, I think that's cute. You know, it's like, but to put it out there, to actually bring it to the table of like, this is all of it, not just the parts of me that I'm trying to curate for the world.
Yeah. It's so that, I mean, that in and of itself does rewire the mind too, though, right? When you get a different, yeah, when you react differently to yourself and others reflect that too, that repatterns it. Like suddenly the shame dissipates and you're like, oh, actually this part isn't as bad or, you know, shameful as I thought it was. And that like does rewire things. So it really is all just so connected.
It is. It's doing the thing too that, and not for, it's interesting because it's not like force yourself, you got to go do it. And it's hard. It's like just take a tiny step in the direction of that, which the direction you want to go. Another big one, you know, for me was public speaking. It's taking the steps and you're going to fall, you're going to make mistakes. But the brain believes that like, if I do the thing wrong or bad, or the part of me that's, you know, has a crooked this or a whatever dimple that, if I'm seen, that I won't be loved. And so the part of the repatterning is like, show yourself in your imperfection and have the actual lived experience. Like, oh, they didn't run. And if they do run, like, you know, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable, but like, thank God you figured that out now as opposed to 10 years down the line.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it really is. It's so profound and it just, to me, it's exciting, you know, like once you actually get a taste of the feeling that comes on the other side of like showing up and going a little bit further and like meeting yourself a little bit deeper, it starts to become exciting, right? When these parts come up, like obviously there's the discomfort and the challenge, and that also does increase, I think, with the like as you continue to go after that which you want, you're confronted with like new layers of that. But it does become, it becomes exciting in many ways because you recognize that like you have the ability to keep expanding and therefore making space to hold the dreams that you have and the partner and the success and all these things that we desire. Really, it's all connected in that way.
Yeah, there's something, just as one sentence to anchor in along the journey of like becoming your fuller self, is that humans don't want perfection, they want truth. Like your most magnetic self is your truthful self. It's not the finished product. And this, it's like, it's once you really understand it, you actually are liberated because your capacity to be truthful with what's presenting as opposed to trying to mask it or change it, from that place, you're actually the most confident person in the room always. And the idea that you have to perform this, you know, version, whether it be physical appearance, what you say, what you curate, like it shifted a lot for me in my own work. For a long time I wrote, and I'm a writer. But the idea of stepping out from behind the written word is like, well, it's less like I can't read it over. And it's funny because I actually didn't read my work over much. I have many typos in my work, but it was more like the safety net. Like, oh, if I need to think about it or take a pause, I can think about it. But as you realize, you can't actually make a mistake. The only mistake you can make is trying to think you can't make a mistake, because then you get caught in the trap of needing to cover things up or lie, or like the lie, the defense of the lie is so unnecessary. Even when we think of the worst offenses, like it's we only step out of alignment to protect ourselves. And so you're invited in every moment back into complete congruence, energetic congruence and alignment, if you can just be real about why you did something that wasn't perfect. And in that process, this is me getting a little bit cryptic, but in that process, you grow, you actually become better at doing the thing that you want to do, whether that be something like public speaking. But even if we think of something wild like infidelity in a marriage, most women's worst nightmare. Yeah, like, oh my God, like he, that's the one thing that I could never navigate. It's like, actually, even the worst nightmare, if both parties are willing to sit in truth and understand that every difficult, challenging thing that takes us out of like, bliss and joy or whatever is actually the invitation back into bliss and joy. It's like, why did that happen? No villain, no victim, no savior, just people trying to understand, okay, why did I do that? Oh, let's work together. It's a working with instead of a doing to. Like the drama triangle is a doing to. Like, you need to do this. And if you don't do this, and, versus like, we created the situation together. We want to grow together. Let's understand. No victim, no villain. Let's heal together. Like that, to me, I mean, there's no end to how powerful these concepts are if you're truly willing to apply them. And the best thing you can do is find the one area of your life you don't want to apply them. That's where you're most stuck. And if you can, and maybe don't go straight to the hardest thing if this is completely new to you, start with the person that cuts you off in traffic. But the work, it applies 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really just, I think the more that you do this work on yourself, the more you recognize that everyone is in the same kind of patterns, like we're all unconsciously projecting and trying to get our needs met in weird ways and have our conditioning and everything coming to the surface. And that's when you really start to have such a greater capacity and understanding and compassion and realize that we're all just doing our best here, right? Totally. And so I really do love that. It's been, like I said, the most healing part for me of all the things I've tried. It really just always comes back to this piece of self-responsibility and choosing to look inward and use life as a mirror. Like, you don't have to go digging. You just have to look at where are you getting upset?
It's right there.
It's right here always. And so I have a few rapid fire questions that I ask everyone at the end, and then we'll start to wrap this up.
Cool.
So the first one is, what's one of the most important lessons you've learned along your journey?
It's always me.
Top 3 health and wellness practices, and this can be any kind of health and wellness.
Okay, spending time in the sun with the least amount of clothing as possible. Just truly having an experience with the sun too, like whatever that means to you. But yeah, for me, it's not just like, oh yeah, I'm getting my sun time. It's like, it's almost a religious experience in the sun. Number 2, definitely the framework of self-responsibility. It's become like the fabric of my life. It's so healing and helpful, and it's not always comfortable, but definitely anchoring in that, particularly in the container of relationship. To me, it's just magical to be able to do this with someone else and heal together. And 3, oh gosh, there's so many.
You know what's coming to mind for me, for you?
Omegas. It's funny, it came up too, but I was like, do we want to go down that rabbit hole?
I know.
I'll just
I was going to ask you about it, but yeah, just mention if you want.
I'll include omegas because, I've been so long into nutrition and health and doing all the things. And I've just realized recently the gaping hole that is omega-3s in my diet. And it's been life-changing to find to find my way to that gap and actually just test. We can share a link or something and more information on that. I've written an article recently because it's definitely a rabbit hole, but of understanding the value of omega-3s when it comes to cellular health and being kind of like the thing that connects all the dots between your choices, not only physical, but all your mental, emotional capacity, right? I guess 3 beyond omegas could be, they're all connected. We can do as much mental, emotional work as we want, but if we don't have the nutritional foundation, like the physical practices that keep us like resourced, then we can't. It becomes airy and ungrounded, and vice versa. You can do all the things in the physical realm perfectly, But if you don't have a relationship to the metaphysical, to your inner world, to spirit, to your soul, then again, to me, it's the two, and they need to work together to truly thrive.
Yeah, I've learned so much from you in that area, and I'm excited to get going with that at some point too. So maybe we can include your article below if people want to dive into it a little more. We'll also include your Instagram so people can follow along, and you share a lot of great information there. But yeah, I love that. And then, my last question for you that I like to ask everyone, considering that this is called the Home to Self podcast, and that means a lot of different things to different people. But what does coming home to yourself mean to you?
Actually, I love the concept. I speak about it too a lot in the realm of radical self-responsibility, that this work is about becoming a fuller version of yourself and coming home to that which you are, not the perfect ideal you think you need to be, but truly meeting yourself where you are, coming back into meeting your parts, and yeah, the most comfortable you're ever going to be, the happiest, the inner peace, it's all inside of yourself. I mean, it truly is. And and sometimes it takes a while. Yeah, people go searching. They take as long as they need to take, but eventually you realize that coming home to yourself, it's the path to freedom.
Yeah, sometimes we go on this crazy path just to come back and realize, it's already always been right here.
And we must. I think it's part of the arc is like you have to deviate from it to actually be able to see it and then consciously make your way back to it. I just think it's part of it all, which, also comes back to why we don't want to try and save people from having that experience for themselves.
Yeah, it's all part of the journey, and it's happening the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, trusting it for sure.
Totally.
Thank you so much, Camille. This has been amazing. I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
Same.
It's so refreshing. And I'd love for you to share with people how they can connect with you.
Yeah, Camille Julia is on Instagram. We also, my partner and I, have our @Becoming Fully Human page, and website is just becomingfullyhuman.ca.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll include all those links in the show notes below. So yeah, but I appreciate you so much. Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Amazing. Well, we'll catch you next time, and I'm excited to stay connected.